out, now." He pointed at the door in front of 800 people, his jaw tight with anger. His brothers stared at his shoes and said nothing. The woman standing at his side hid a satisfied grin behind her champagne glass. Zola left quietly. None of them had any idea what she was about to do next. The ballroom of the Whitfield Foundation Gala glowed like a jewelry box. Gold light spilled from 3 great chandeliers. Waiters moved like shadows carrying trays of crystal. 800 of the richest, proudest people in the city stood shoulder to shoulder, and every one of them had come to celebrate one man. His name was Amiri Whitfield, and tonight Amiri felt like a king. He stood near the stage in a black tuxedo cut so sharp it could draw blood. His smile was wide, his handshake was firm. For 2 years, the Whitfield family firm had been drowning, one missed payment away from collapse. And then, out of nowhere, a mystery investor had appeared and poured in a fortune. The company breathed again, and Amiri, who had begged and sweated in back rooms to make it happen, was being honored as the man who saved his family name. Cameras flashed. A reporter called his name. A senator shook his hand. Somewhere a string quartet played something soft and expensive. Amiri drank it all in like a man who had been thirsty his whole life. And in a way, he had. You do not understand a man like Amiri until you understand his thirst. He had forgotten one thing. He had forgotten his wife. Her name was Zola. She stood near the edge of the room wearing an elegant, soft peach dress. Not a designer gown, not diamonds, just a modest dress she had carefully stitched herself at the kitchen table 3 nights before. She looked calm. She looked kind. She looked, to every sneering eye in that ballroom, completely out of place. Watch her closely, because she is the only person here who knows the truth. A woman in a striking deep ruby-red couture evening gown drifted to Amiri's side. Her name was Gabrielle. She called herself a consultant. She wore success like perfume, and she had been whispering in Amiri's ear for months. She leaned close to him now, her eyes finding Zola across the floor, and she said, soft and cruel, "Is that really her, tonight, in that?" Amiri's jaw tightened. His smile cracked at the edges. He had spent 2 years climbing, and here was the woman from his poor beginnings, standing in his golden room, reminding everyone where he came from. 2 women near the bar looked Zola up and down and laughed behind their hands. A man in a velvet jacket muttered something about the help getting lost. Zola heard all of it. She always heard it. She had spent her whole life being the poorest person in rooms full of gold, and she had learned long ago that the cruelest people are the ones who are only 1 generation away from a dirt road themselves. She did not answer them. She simply looked for her husband. Zola saw his face change. She had seen that look before. She crossed the floor gently, holding a glass of water, and she reached for his arm the way a wife does. "Amiri," she said quietly, "you look tired. Have you eaten anything tonight?" He pulled his arm away like her touch burned. "What are you wearing?" he hissed under his breath. "I told you tonight was important." "I know. I made it myself. I thought." "You thought," he laughed, and it was not a kind laugh. A few heads turned. Gabrielle smiled into her champagne, and somewhere behind Amiri, his younger brother Terence shifted his weight and looked away, because Terence already felt what was coming, and Terence was a coward. Here is a question for you. When a man is ashamed of where he came from, who does he punish first? The person who remembers. "Everybody's watching," Amiri said, and now his voice was rising, and the people nearest went quiet to listen. "You know that? Everybody in this room is watching me tonight, and you show up looking like you're here to clean the floors." Zola did not flinch. "I came to stand with you," she said, "like I always have." "Well, don't." The word landed hard. "You embarrass me. You always have." 800 people. The music kept playing, but the air around them died. Zola's hand, still holding that glass of water, did not shake, but something behind her eyes went very still. "Amiri," she said, one last time, so soft only he could hear it. "Don't do this." And that was when he pointed at the door. "Out, now!" The words cut across the ballroom. Guests near the stage froze. A woman gasped. Amiri stood there with his arm out straight, finger aimed at the tall doors, his chest heaving, his pride a wildfire he could no longer control. "You don't belong at my table. You never did. Get out before you humiliate me any further." Zola looked at him. Then she looked at Terence, his own brother, who stared at his polished shoes and said nothing, nothing at all. Then she looked at Gabrielle, who lifted her glass just an inch, hiding a grin behind the rim like a cat hiding its teeth. Triple betrayal. The husband who cast her out, the family that stayed silent, the stranger who smiled. 3 knives, 1 night. Do you feel that? That thing in your chest right now? That heat, that wanting to yell? Zola felt it too. She was human. A part of her wanted to slap the champagne out of Gabrielle's hand and tell the whole room exactly who they were laughing at. But Miss Ruth's voice was louder. "Build it quiet, baby. Let them talk. Talkers never build a thing." And Zola? She simply set her glass of water down on the nearest table. She straightened her dress, and she walked. Head level, steps even. Past the whispers, past the phones lifting to film her shame, past the donor wall where the names of the gala's greatest patrons were carved in brass. Her fingers brushed one small plaque as she passed it. 3 words. The Sparrow Group. She let her hand rest there for half a second, and then she was gone, out into the night. The doors closed behind her with a soft, final click. Amiri exhaled. Gabrielle touched his shoulder. "You did the right thing," she murmured. "A man like you needs a woman who matches the view." And the narrator will tell you now what not one soul in that ballroom understood. The quietest woman in the room had just been thrown out of a building she owned. The gala, the chandeliers, the mystery fortune that saved the Whitfield name, all of it traced back through 100 quiet doors to her. But to understand what she did next, you have to know where she came from. Still water runs deep, and still water remembers. Rewind with me, 20 years and a whole world away. Before the chandeliers, there was a tin roof house at the end of a dirt road. When it rained, the roof sang. When the sun came, the metal baked. Inside that house lived a little girl named Zola and the grandmother who raised her, because Zola's mama had passed young and her daddy had gone looking for work one winter and never came home. The grandmother's name was Miss Ruth, and Miss Ruth cleaned houses. She left before the sun and came home after it dropped, her hands cracked from other people's floors, other people's dishes, other people's dirt. But she never came empty. Every evening she brought back one small thing, a lesson. "Baby," Miss Ruth would say, sitting on the porch steps with her aching feet in a basin of warm water, "you see that little bird up there?" She pointed to a sparrow building a nest under the eaves. "Nobody gave that bird a home. Nobody handed her a thing. She builds it herself, twig by twig, while everybody looks up and thinks she's just singing." Then she would smile, tired and warm, and she would say the thing Zola would carry her whole life. "A sparrow is never given a nest. She builds it her own. You hear me? You build your own, and you build it quiet, and one day they'll look up and wonder how high it got." For Zola's 10th birthday, Miss Ruth pressed something into her hand. It was a small wooden sparrow, hand-carved, no bigger than a thumb, smooth from all the times the old woman's fingers had worried over it. "This was your mama's. Now it's yours. When the world tells you you're small, you hold this and you remember what small things can build." Zola never let it go, not once, not in 20 years.
She kept it in her pocket on the day she buried Miss Ruth, who worked right up until the week her heart gave out, cleaning other people's floors so her grandmother would never have to. She held it in her fist at the graveside, that small wooden bird, and she made the old woman a promise into the dirt. "I'm gonna build it, Grandma, just like you said, and I'm gonna keep it quiet till it's too high for anybody to knock down." She was 21 years old that day. She had a bus ticket, a taped-up laptop, and a promise. That was all. She grew up soft. That is the truth, and I want you to hold on to it, because softness is not weakness, and this story will prove it. Zola grew up believing in kindness. She believed if you gave love, love came back. She believed a person's word was a bridge you could stand on. She forgave easy, she trusted easy, and she worked. Lord, that girl worked. Nights cleaning offices downtown, days at a community college, a second-hand laptop held together with tape, teaching herself numbers, teaching herself business, teaching herself how money moved through the world while the rich slept.
And somewhere in those long nights, mopping the marble lobby of a glass tower, she made herself a promise. One day, I'll own a floor in a building like this. She was 19. She had $40 in a coffee can. That was the whole fortune of Zola back then. $40 and a wooden bird. Watch how a sparrow builds. She met Amiri when they were both young and both had nothing. He was charming then, full of dreams, and she loved him the way soft people love, completely, without holding back. When his family firm started to sink, it was Zola who sat up with him at the kitchen table. It was Zola who knew the numbers. It was Zola who quietly began to build something of her own on the side. A small holding company, one careful investment at a time, twig by twig, never bragging, never spending, letting it grow in the dark. She named it after the bird, the Sparrow Group, and she told no one, not even her husband, because Miss Ruth's voice was always in her ear. Build it quiet. And she was good at it. That is the part nobody expects. The soft-spoken woman everyone underestimated had a mind like a steel trap. She saw things before other people saw them. A neighborhood about to turn, a small company about to grow, a piece of land nobody wanted that a highway would one day run past. She bought quietly and waited patiently. One good decision became two, two became 10, and every dollar she made she poured straight back into the nest, never once stopping to spend it on herself, never once needing the world to know. She still wore modest thrift store dresses while quietly acquiring office towers, shopping centers, and prime real estate across the city. She still rode the bus while the empire she had built grew larger with every passing year. Why? Because the wanting to be seen was the very sickness she watched her husband alive. She had decided long ago she would never catch it. There were nights it was lonely. There were nights she wanted to run home and shake Amiri awake and say, "Look, look what I made. Be proud of me." But every time she came close, he would say something small and cruel about where she came from, and she would put the wooden bird back in her pocket and keep her secret one more day. A heart learns slowly where it is safe to be seen, and Zola's heart had learned that her husband was not a safe place. That is a quiet kind of heartbreak, the kind that doesn't make a sound. Why would a woman hide what she was building from the man she loved? Hold that question. The answer is coming, and it will break your heart. Because here is what Zola learned slowly as the years passed. Amiri did not love the woman who mopped floors. Amiri loved the idea of rising above her. Every time he climbed a step, he looked back at her like she was the mud he'd climbed out of, and a soft heart notices these things long before it admits them. Still water runs deep, and still water remembers. Now come back to the present, to the weeks before that gala, and watch the knives get sharpened. Gabrielle did not come into their lives by accident. She was a deal maker, sharp and hungry, and she had heard the Whitfield firm was desperate. She smelled a man who could be led, and a man who was ashamed of his roots is the easiest man in the world to lead, because you only have to promise him he can cut them off. "You've outgrown so much," she told Amiri one evening, the two of them alone in his office long after the staff had gone. "The company, the city, your whole old life." She let that last word hang. A man about to stand in front of 800 people needs a certain kind of woman beside him, one who fits the picture. Amiri knew who she meant. He said nothing, but silence from a proud and frightened man is a kind of yes. Understand his motive, because this is not a cartoon. Amiri was not born cruel. Amiri was scared. He had spent his whole life terrified of being poor again, terrified of the dirt road, terrified that everyone could see the boy he used to be. And Zola, sweet and steady, was a living mirror of that boy. Every time he looked at her, he saw where he came from, and he hated the mirror more than he ever loved the woman holding it. Fear makes men do ugly things. Remember that. And Gabrielle knew exactly which fear to press. She had done her homework on Amiri Whitfield. She knew about the dirt road. She knew about the mother who died young and the father who put the name in the firm above the family itself. She knew Amiri had spent his whole adult life running from a boy nobody respected. So she never once told him to leave his wife. Oh no, she was smarter than that. She only ever told him he deserved more. "You built this," she would say, which was a lie, but a sweet one. "You, and you're still carrying dead weight from a life you already left behind." Drip by drip, poison tastes like honey when you're thirsty enough. And Amiri, remember, was always thirsty. What did Gabrielle want out of it? Not love. Let me be clear about that, because it matters. Gabrielle wanted a percentage. She wanted to be the one standing next to the man when the big deal closed, so that when the money moved, some of it moved through her hands. She had latched on to men before and left them hollow. Amiri was just the next branch she planned to sit on until a higher one came along. He thought he had found a partner. He had found a bird of prey. So the family began to plot, not with knives but with soft words at Sunday dinners. His father Otis, the old head of the firm, a man who cared for the family name more than any single soul in it, began to say things like, "Son, appearances matter now," and "You're a big man these days. People talk." His brother Terence heard all of it and said nothing, because Terence liked the new money, liked the new cars, and telling the truth would have cost him his comfort, and comfort, for a weak man, is worth more than a brother's marriage. They decided quietly that Zola should be eased out before the big signing night, the night the mystery investor's deal would be made final and the Whitfield name would shine again. They thought they were pushing out a poor woman. They had no idea. It came to a head 3 weeks before the gala. Zola was in the kitchen stirring a pot, the wooden sparrow sitting on the windowsill where it always sat. Amiri walked in and did not sit down. That was how she knew. "I want a divorce," he said. The spoon stopped moving. "I've thought about it a long time," he went on, not looking at her. "We've grown apart. I've grown. You're still—" He gestured at the small kitchen, the taped-up cabinet, the whole modest life. "You're still here. I outgrew you, Zola. That's all it is." She turned around slowly, and do you know what she said? She did not scream. She did not throw the pot. She looked at the man she had loved when he had nothing, the man she had built up in the dark, and she asked one small question. "Is that what you really believe, that you outgrew me?" "Yes," he said, and he meant it. Something in her chest went quiet then. Not broken, quiet. The way a house goes quiet right before a storm turns the sky green. He packed a bag that same week and moved into a hotel suite the company paid for, and he told his family it was over, and they were relieved. His father clapped him on the back. His brother poured him a drink. Not one of them called Zola to ask if she was all right. 12 years of marriage and not one phone call. That is how little they thought of her.
That is how invisible a quiet woman can be to people who only see the loud. That night she sat alone in the dark and held the little wooden bird against her heart, and for the first time in a long time she let the tears come. Not because she still loved the man. She had stopped loving him somewhere in the last cold year, if she was honest. She cried for the waste of it. She cried for the young man he used to be, the one who dreamed at her kitchen table before the thirst took him. She cried for the 12 years. And then she wiped her face and she looked at the little sparrow in her palm, and something in her went hard and clear and calm. How much can one's soft heart carry before it breaks, or before it hardens into something they will one day regret? Zola did not know yet, but the answer was already forming. And it was not revenge, understand that. What was forming in her was not a plan to destroy anybody. It was simply a decision to stop hiding, to finally, after 20 years, let the world look up and see how high the nest had grown. And across town, in a locked office on the 40th floor of a glass tower, the same tower she once mopped as a girl of 19, a light stayed on all night. Every Thursday that light burned late, and Amiri had never once asked why. He assumed she cleaned there still. He assumed she was small. She wasn't breaking. She was deciding. Still water runs deep, and still water remembers. Now, the night of the signing, the same ballroom, the same 800 faces, and a door about to open. The Whitfield firm had been saved, everyone believed, by a single silent giant of an investor, a private group no one had ever met, whose money had appeared like a miracle 2 years ago and kept the whole company alive. Tonight, at last, the founder of that group would appear in person to make the final deal. Amiri stood on the stage in a fresh tuxedo, glowing, ready to shake the hand of the invisible savior. Gabrielle stood beside him in a striking deep ruby red couture evening gown. His father beamed, his brother clapped along with the crowd. The lights dimmed, a hush fell, the host stepped to the microphone.
"Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "for 2 years, one investor has quietly kept this company and this family alive. Tonight, for the first time, the founder and sole owner of the Sparrow Group has agreed to join us. Please welcome the person to whom the Whitfield firm owes everything." The great doors at the back of the ballroom opened, and Zola walked back in. Gone was the modest outfit. She now wore a breathtaking champagne gold couture evening gown, elegant and flawless, and pinned at her collar, small enough that only the front rows could see it, was a little wooden sparrow. She did not rush. She did not gloat. She walked up the center of the room the same way she had walked out of it, head level, steps even, except this time 800 people rose to their feet because they thought they were honoring a stranger. Amiri's smile was still on his face when she reached the stage. It took him a full 3 seconds to understand. You could watch it happen. You could watch the color drain from a proud man's face in real time. "No," he said. Just that. "No!" The host, confused, gestured to her. "Sir, this is the founder of the Sparrow Group. This is the investor who saved your company." Zola took the microphone gently from his hand. She looked out at the sea of faces, at the father, at the silent brother, at Gabrielle, whose striking deep ruby red couture evening gown suddenly looked cheap, and finally at her husband. "Good evening," she said, calm as still water. "My name is Zola. 2 years ago, when this company was 1 week from closing its doors, a single investor kept it alive. That investor was me." The silence was total. Let me tell you what she had built, because this is the part they never saw.
While they laughed at the woman in the modest peach dress, she had spent 20 years turning $40 in a coffee can into an empire worth $12 billion. A fortune larger than everything the Whitfield family had ever touched, stacked 10 times over. She did not inherit a dime of it. Nobody handed her a nest. She built it herself, in the dark, twig by twig, while they all looked up and thought she was just singing. She turned then, slow, and she looked at the people who laughed. The two women from the bar, the man in the velvet jacket. She did not name them. She did not have to. They felt her eyes and they looked at the floor. And the narrator wants you to notice that, how fast the loud go quiet when the ground shifts under them. For 2 years, Zola said, you have all wondered who the invisible investor was. You toasted him. You thanked him in your speeches. You called him a genius and a savior and a giant. A small, sad smile touched her mouth. You never once thought to look at the woman cleaning up after your party, because to you, a woman like me could only ever be the help. Amiri, she said, and her voice did not rise, and that was what made it terrible. 3 weeks ago, you told me you outgrew me. 2 nights ago, in that doorway, you told 800 people I did not belong at your table. She paused. You were standing on my floor, in my building, drinking on my money. You told me to get out. She let it breathe. So I did. I just came back to collect what's mine. You could have heard a breath drop. Gabrielle's hand began to shake around her champagne glass. Terence, the silent brother, finally lifted his eyes, and they were full of shame. And Amiri opened his mouth and no words came out, because there were none, because the mirror he had smashed had just turned out to be the whole sky. Still water runs deep, and still water remembers. And then, one by one, the walls came down. Here is the thing about a reversal. The best ones need no shouting. Zola did not scream. She did not have to. She simply stopped holding up the men who had cast her out, and gravity did the rest. She set the microphone down. She turned to the board members seated at the front tables, the real power in that room, and she spoke plainly. The deal that was to be signed tonight is withdrawn. Effective now, my group's support of this company ends. A ripple of panic ran through the tables like wind through wheat, because everyone there knew the ugly truth Amiri had hidden for 2 years. The Whitfield firm had no life of its own. It had been running on her money the whole time, a body kept warm by someone else's heart, and she had just stopped giving it. Amiri lunged for the microphone. Wait, we can talk. Zola, be reasonable. I was reasonable for 20 years. You can't do this. His voice climbed, panicked now, the king's crown slipping. Everything I built.
She walked to the tall doors, the same doors he had pointed her toward, and she pushed them open herself, and she stepped out into the night with her head level and her steps even, and the little wooden sparrow catching the light at her collar. She didn't destroy them. She simply stopped holding them up. Still water runs deep, and still water remembers. Weeks passed. The city moved on the way cities do. But at the end of a certain dirt road, the little tin roof house still stood. Only now it stood proud, restored board by board, its roof mended, its porch swept, kept exactly the shape it had always been. Zola could have bought a palace on a hill. She bought back her grandmother's house instead, because a woman who forgets where her nest began forgets how to fly. At dawn, she sat on the porch steps, the same steps where Miss Ruth used to soak her aching feet, and she held the little wooden sparrow in her open palm and let the morning sun warm it. She was not thinking about Amiri. That surprised her a little. She was not thinking about the ballroom, or the board, or the fortune, or the fall. She was thinking about her grandmother's voice and how right the old woman had been. Nobody gives a sparrow her nest. She builds it herself, twig by twig, quiet, while the whole world looks up and thinks she's only singing. And here is the truth the narrator wants to leave in your hands tonight, so listen close. A woman's silence is not surrender. Sometimes it is the sound of her building something they will never be able to take. They laughed at her dress. They pointed at the door. They mistook her softness for weakness and her quiet for defeat. And she let them, because she knew what she was building, and she knew it was rising, twig by patient twig, higher than any of them could reach. She stood up as the sun cleared the trees. She walked inside to a small shelf on the wall, and there sat Miss Ruth's sparrow in its place of honor. Beside it, Zola set down a second little bird, one she had carved herself over many quiet evenings with her own 2 hands. The next sparrow, the next twig, the next nest. Somewhere across the city, a proud man was learning how cold a room gets when you throw out the only warmth in it. But that was his story now, and his to carry. Hers was just beginning. Still water runs deep, and still water remembers. She was told she was nothing, and she answered with everything. If this story moved you, if you've ever been the quiet one they underestimated, type "She Rises" and let her know you saw her worth. Subscribe, because next time the underestimated one might just be someone exactly like you. Stay soft, stay building, and never let anyone show you the door to a house you already own.